I am Flavia Zimmermann from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Professor Valerie Hudson. Professor Valerie Hudson is from the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. She also holds a Fulbright Distinguished Chair Fellowship at the Australian National University. And today we will be discussing gender and its impact on international relations and security in the world. Thank you for being with us, Valerie.
Delighted to be here.
Valerie, can you please tell us how gender imbalance impacts peace and security in the world?
Well, gender inequity affects many different dimensions of what we would consider to be pillars of national security. So if you want to talk about food security, you need to talk about the gendered nature of food production. How in many parts of the world it's women who put in far more agricultural labor hours than men, but how land ownership is gendered disfavoring women. In many parts of the world, women have very little access to title to land. It's also true that women often don't receive remuneration for cash crops, for example, because it goes to the land title owner. So if you wanted to look at what's going on with food security, you'd have to look at what's going on with women. And the same could be said of other pillars of national security. So if we looked at health, if we looked at demographics, if we looked at wealth of the nation, if we looked even at governance and conflict, we would see some really interesting links to what's going on with women. It turns out that the situation, status, and security of women in a society is a very strong predictor of the nation's potential for peace and prosperity.
Thank you very much. And if you could please, Valerie, just expand a little bit more and tell us how women empowerment and greater social inclusion can impact in a positive way government and economic development.
Right, and there's two dimensions of inclusion. All right, one of the dimensions which we've just spoken about is actually seeing the connections between what's going on with women and what kind of outcomes you're getting at the nation-state level. So part of it is kind of opening your eyes to see connections that are so normalized, so unremarkable that we no longer see them. They become invisible to us. The second dimension of inclusion, as you alluded to, is actually including women when collective decision-making is taking place. It's stunning to think that here we are in the 21st century, and worldwide, globally, we still have only 1 in 5 national legislators being women, even though almost half of the population of the planet Earth is women. That means that women are not around the table when crucial decisions about which they have insight and perspective and concerns are being made. And a great recent example from my own country is where the Senate formed a caucus to redo health care in the United States. Not one woman was a member of that group. That's shocking. That's outrageous.
I'm sorry to hear. That's really very disappointing. Thank you very much, Valerie. And in your book, Sex and World Peace, you make a very interesting statement about the 2008 world economic crisis and the implications for international relations, and to which extent the fact that women were not engaging in a more active way in the decision-making process in the way international business is made. If you could please expand it a little bit more.
Absolutely, and here this is not my original thought. I mean, this comes from Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, who said if it had been Lehman's sisters instead of Lehman brothers, we probably wouldn't have gotten ourselves in this kind of mess. And what she's talking about is some very interesting research, both micro-level research and macro-level research, that shows when you involve women in decision-making in the financial area, or any other area for that matter, is you get decisions that are less risky, that are more creative, and that are less parochially self-interested. That is, they think about the welfare of the larger group and not simply the welfare of their own individual self-interest. And so on a macro level, for example, there was a study recently done of 6,500 corporations, and they found that those that had a higher representation of women on the corporate boards were far less likely to be involved in scandals such as bribery and corruption than those who had a low percentage of women on the corporate board. So I think there's strong evidence at both the micro and macro level that you get far better decision making when men and women are making the decisions together.
Thank you very much. And Valerie, if you could please explain how gender-based violence and the culture that gender-based violence creates, how it can impact on peace and security of nations.
Absolutely. From my point of view, after my quarter century of research in this area, I see a very strong continuum between what's going on at the household level and what you take as sort of templates for action at the nation-state level. So if domestic violence is normalized, for example, we have some nations where over 90% of women experience physical and sexual abuse within the home. Over 90%. So if physical coercion, violent coercion, is the way to resolve conflicts at the household level, and if this is so stunningly prevalent, and if the children of the society are being socialized to see that the way you solve problems is to beat up those who are not like you, of course that's going to become a cultural template, right? When you're faced with the first other, a woman, all right, the decisions you make about who that woman is to you as a man are then going to replay themselves all the way up the line from community to nation state. And all others, such as those who are different from you ethnically, those who are different from you religiously, those who are different from you in terms of citizenship, all of these differences will be analyzed along the same lenses that you analyze what do you do with this other within your household, the woman.
Thank you very much. And in your opinion, Valerie, which pathways we could introduce to mitigate problems associated with gender-based violence?
Yeah, in our book, Sex and World Peace, we talk about how there has to be a pincer movement. What we've discovered is that top-down approaches are fine, but they're certainly not enough. Given my work on the Women's Stats database, I can tell you that there is often a huge disconnect between the laws on the books and then what actually happens on the ground. So, for example, in a nation, domestic violence may be outlawed, but you may have over 90% of women who are experiencing it. And if these women reported it to the police would either laugh at them or beat them up or rape them before sending them home. So, yes, you need good laws, right? Because if you have laws against gender-based violence, that will bring in the judicial system at some point. But laws are not enough. You also have to have bottom-up strategies where you have to change minds and hearts. You have to educate. And most particularly, the two things you need education on is, one, women need to know what their rights are. Oftentimes they have no idea that they have rights under the law. But number two, and equally, if not more importantly, is you need to give men a different idea of what being a man means and what masculinity means. And until men see that there is an alternative path to being an honorable and admired man, then I don't think any of the laws on the books will matter. So a pincer movement, top down and bottom up.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Valerie. And wrapping up our interview, Valerie, if you could please just explain to us the impact that gender imbalance might have in China, and which possible ways we could reverse this trend?
Yes, here in Asia, you have quite a number of countries that cull girls from the birth population, get rid of them either through female infanticide or through female infanticide's modern cousin, which is sex-selective abortion. There are some other nations that practice this as well, such as in the Caucasus and Central Asia. But the two largest nations that practice this are India and China, where over 40% of the world's population lives. And it is true that China, due to its one-child policy, was loosened to a two-child policy in 2015. But the decades of the one-child policy gave strong incentive to families to get rid of any girls that were born to the family. And in India, the dowry system also plays in and incentivizes getting rid of daughters. And so what we're seeing is that by 2020 in China, in terms of young adults, ages 15 to 30, you're looking at about 30 to 50 million young adult men who are in excess to the number of women in society. And in India, you're looking at about 25 to 35 million young adult men who are in excess to the number of women in society. And what we and other researchers have found is that areas with abnormal sex ratios are much more plagued by violent crime, by demonstrations, by organized crime syndicates that sometimes even morph into rebellions against the state. It's also true that the government becomes aware that this is a problem, and in some historical cases have actually sent those men off under the guise of making war or invading or fighting abroad in a military sense, in the hopes that they would actually not return to their homeland. Mm-hmm. So I think abnormal sex ratios are one of the examples, Flavia, where what's happening with women has important and significant consequences for your national security.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Pleasure talking to you.
Lovely to talk with you as well.
For more information, please visit our website, www.internationalaffairs.org.au. Thank you.